Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts.
Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott, and I have a wonderful guest today, Laura Berman. Laura Berman is a world-renowned educator and therapist in the area of love, sex, and relationships. She is the founder and director of the Berman Institute in Chicago, which specializes in helping couples learn to resolve conflict, come together in crises, grow that emotional and physical intimacy to new heights. She is assistant clinical professor of psychiatry and obstetrics.
Yeah, wait, let me just stop you. I'm sorry
okay.
to do this, but you're gonna, just because that is an old bio.
Oh,
I'm not on faculty anymore, and I don't live in Chicago anymore.
Oh.
So let me show you. I'll give you a little bio in the chat.
The bottom line is that Laura is an amazing writer, and she's written some amazing books. She is an expert on sex and relationships. I brought Laura on because I want to talk about her amazing book, Quantum Love. And that's the reason I wanted to talk to her. And so we can talk about it more. Is there anything more that you wanted me to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I thought we were recording, so I was going to stop you. No, I just that I'm not in Chicago anymore. I'm now, and I'm not on the faculty of Northwestern anymore, but I still am devoted to helping people love and be loved better. And I still have a private practice, and I still have my podcast and do books, but I'm not on the faculty anymore.
Okay. And you have a podcast, Language of Love?
Yeah.
And so, I definitely recommend that. And you can find your website at drlauraberman.com.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to the Reality Revolution, Laura.
Thank you. Let's revolutionize it.
Let's revolutionize it. So I have many people that come to me asking questions about relationships in relation to my book, The Reality Revolution, that goes into quantum physics and talks about energy and frequency, just like you do.
Yeah.
And so, in talking about relationships in love, the quantum field actually plays a significant role. And your book does an amazing job of going over the characteristics of that and how relationships are actually a field. And there's so many little things that I learned from that book, and I recommend people read that all the time. What inspired you to look at the quantum physics aspect of relationships and sex?
Well, everything I do ends up coming back. That's the lens that I wear in life, right? Relationships and love, sex, and relationships. So almost everything I discover kind of eventually comes back to that. And I also seem to be one of those people that heals, learns, and then teaches. So in the beginning of my career, most of my work was, founded in the training I had and the knowledge I had and the skills I had. And then throughout the bulk of my career, the rest of it has been folding that into my own, really building off of my own personal experiences, of which I've had many, right? Of divorce, of loss, of death, of mothering, of being a wife, of being a mother, of dating, all of that. So quantum love, that really grew out of a dark night of the soul, like many of our finest works do. And it really grew out of what was ultimately started as an act of desperation, because up until that point, this was probably 11 years ago when I started really diving into this. I had worked most of my work was in what I now call the logistical field, right? Like what practical things that you can do and ways to change your cognition and ways to look at things differently and ways to communicate better and skills that you could have or need to have a successful love life. And I still obviously do a lot of that. But when I went through we can get into the details of what happened. I'm very open about it in the book. But when I went through a very dark night of the soul out of desperation, I stumbled upon working with actually a psychic medium. I suddenly stumbled upon how powerful our unconscious thoughts are, silent unconscious thoughts are for how others respond to us. So, and that I thought about that in terms of body language or things like that, but I never thought about it in terms of energetic frequency. And I was so amazed when I processed all this and tried the things this woman was suggesting I try with my oldest son, who was suicidal at the time, that I was flabbergasted. And then I had to geek out and understand it. And that's what ultimately led me to quantum physics. And then once I dove into that, I started playing with it first with my kids, because they were really struggling at the time. And then I thought, maybe let me try this on my husband. And then I tried it on him, and I was really amazed. It's like a Jedi mind trick for your relationship. It really is. And then I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out. And once I kind of figured it out, I started teaching it to my clients and couples. And then that's what led to quantum love.
It's amazing. Love plays a dynamic role in our lives, and it involves energy. And so at the beginning of the book, you really bring about why our energetic profile is an important part of understanding quantum love. And everybody has their own energetic profile. Could you tell me a little bit more about that so people can understand why their energy plays a role in relationships?
Well, the basic foundation of this is that we are all at our core pure atomic vibrating energy. We are not solid. We seem solid because of our limited five senses. But if we were to look at the world through an atomic microscope, we would see that everything that we are and everything around us is all vibration, just vibrating atoms. And we're all kind of part of the same quantum soup. And humans are we're like tuning forks. When you take two tuning forks and you strike one, the other immediately vibrates at exactly the same frequency as the one you struck. And we are doing that in the world. We can only even perceive things that vibrate in harmony with our own frequency. So the reality is we're taking 40 billion bits of information into our brains every millisecond and only consciously processing 2,000 of them. So we're not even aware of it. But when you walk into a group full of people, or even now remotely, because distance is irrelevant in the quantum field, you and I are doing what's called entraining to one another, right? So you and I aren't even, this is our first time meeting. We're obviously not in a love relationship. Multiply that 1,000,000 times when you're in a close love relationship, there is even deeper entrainment, even what we would call quantum entanglement, okay? But you and I are entraining to each other right now. Now, what normally happens is that all of this is going on unconsciously. We're all matching each other's vibration, matching each other's frequency without being aware of it. What I discovered and what I teach in quantum love is when you start to really understand your own energetic frequency, work with that, hold the frequency of that which you want to create, and we can get into that, or the way you want your partner to show up, or the way I want this interview to go, or whatever, then you hold that energetic frequency and everyone and everything around you entrains to you. But most of us don't even know how to do that or even know it exists. So in a love relationship, we are deeply entangled. So when two atoms are entangled together, they're spinning at exactly the same frequency and rate. You have to think of frequency like those old-fashioned radio dials where you have a station and a volume button, right? So there are all these different frequencies that our body is moving through all the time. And I'll get to your original question. I'm just saying the foundation in a second. And then there's the intensity of that vibration, right? So the thing to understand is that we are always, we're creating our reality every millisecond, and we're creating how people respond to us every millisecond based on them in training to what's going on energetically within us. So what I mean by your energy profile is that all of us, because of the degree of trauma we experience and how resolved that trauma is, and the nature of our homes growing up, for instance, when we were really loud and excited and full of joy, did one grown-up say, shh, bring us down? Or did our parents, constantly keep us from, because it was too much or too loud, or because it wasn't really matching their own energetic frequency, keep us low, right? Or do we struggle with depression? Like, there's so many reasons that I get into what kind of goes into creating our unconscious kind of baseline energetic frequency. but we live somewhere in what I call the quantum love map, right? And so the thing to understand is that every feeling we have, what sets our energetic frequency is our feelings. Okay. So the lower vibration your energetic frequency is, the less health you'll have, the less wealth, the less abundance, the less positively people will respond to you. So the lowest frequency emotion is shame, followed by guilt. The highest frequency is love and bliss, right? And then there's everything in between. Probably the midpoint is curiosity and openness, right? To forgiveness, love, arousal, excitement, all the way up to joy and bliss, and anger, resentment, helplessness, blah, 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 all the way down, right? So we all have this kind of range we tend to live in, and it's usually not an extreme range, right? But it's somewhere in that range. And we might pop up higher or pop down lower from time to time, but we tend to live there. And not only do we tend to live there, we have what I call your Effie. So if you imagine like an infinity symbol, that's your ego home frequency index. So what I talk about in quantum love is that ego frequency, where you're going to get much less of what you want, is anything really from resentment down to shame, right? So that would be resentment, anger, holding, I can't think of the word right now, but holding on, not being able to forgive someone, helplessness, guilt, depression, all of those things, right? That's more kind of in what we would call ego frequency, our personality. And then there is home frequency, which is everything from curiosity and openness up, which is really our birthright. That's how we come into the world in home frequency. It just gets conditioned out of us by our families and society and the things that happen to us. But it's called home frequency because that's our natural state. And so understanding how you move, and you may move differently between, so the Effie is kind of set by your highest point where you tend to live and your lowest point where you tend to live. And it may be very different in relationship life than it is in work life, right? Or in parenting. So we can have different kind of ranges. But then there's that general kind of energy profile that we live with. It's so helpful to understand that for a couple of reasons. One, so that you can understand basically the impact that you're having on your life and what you're manifesting and the people around you, but also so that you can start working with it. Because as you start to become cognizant of the emotional states you're holding and how that's even without words and without changing your facial expression or even not even being conscious of it, you are affecting the whole world around you with that. So when you start to understand how you move in that, then you can start to understand, oh, I notice that when that anger is that center point in the infinity, symbol. So when I feel angry, that's when I need to be aware. I can go down the quantum love map, or I can make some shifts and move back to openness or curiosity or excitement or forgiveness or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And you mentioned, quantum entanglement with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my wife and I, who've been together for about 5 years, we live together and we're together. Have you, I'm sure you have, but have you encountered where the longer we're together, we always hear each other's thoughts, we eat the same foods? If she has indigestion, I have indigestion.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a sudden cough, she has a cough. I'm constantly walking around with a mirror now. Every day
Yeah.
it's more of just a mirror. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Or is that just a
You tell
natural
me.
part? Is that a natural part of being together in a quantum state like that?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely true that the closer and more connected we are, more time we spend together, and the higher, it's like the higher the attachment, so to speak,
Right.
the more, and I'm not saying even the conscious attachment, I mean, the higher the conscious and unconscious investment in the relationship, the more entangled you are. And that's a powerful thing, not only because, like, there was a University of Washington study that found that they took couples in a loving relationship and they took one partner to one side of the campus And they took another partner to the other side, and one partner, they shined a light in their eye, and the other partner, they put in a brain scan. And the second they shine the light in one partner's eye, the ocular receptors in the brain of the other partner lit up.
Wow.
And our heart rates, there's so much cool research from the Heart Math Institute about how our heart rates synchronize. Sometimes, even when, remember, if two atoms are entangled and are, like I said, they're vibrating at exactly the same frequency, rate, everything. And I were to take one of those atoms that was entangled with the other and shoot it to the moon. And then this one here, I somehow managed to change the direction it was spinning, or the frequency or the angle. In the same instant, the one on the moon would change as well.
Right.
Because once you're entangled, you're constantly matching each other. So it can be a blessing and a curse. Like you said, you can end up, that's what we mean when we say bad moods are contagious. Or when you walk into the house, you already know that your partner is in a bad mood before you even see them, right? It's the reason it becomes a problem is when you're at the effect of whatever it is your partner is feeling, or they're at the effect of you in ways that don't serve you. And when you're not really being conscious of that level of impact you have. And that's really what really led to me ultimately getting so curious and diving into this, because my oldest son, who's now 26, but he was in 9th grade, and he was severely depressed and anxious, and everything I had tried as like a therapist mama, had not worked. Medication, therapists, educators, programs, whatever. And so out of desperation, I went to this psychic medium who's since become one of my most valuable teachers, Therese Rowley. And that was the first time I heard the term, because she said, oh, let me read his field. And I was thinking, because I'd never been to someone like this. I was a scientist, And she's like, let me read his field. And I'm thinking, okay, the kid's in school and this person is reading her field. She said, oh, he's clairsentient. I had never heard that before. And she explained to me, okay, that, means that he feels, it's basically what an empath is. He feels what everyone else is feeling. But the thing with him, she said, which made perfect sense once I understood it, is that he's feeling what everyone else is feeling, but has no idea what's his feelings and what's everyone else's. So he's having to come up with all these crazy, I feel angry all of a sudden, even though I had a great day. Oh, it must be because this person did this or that, he was trying to explain it to himself. And he was a real science geek and would, he was a teenager. He thought I was like every teenager thought I was a complete idiot. And he comes home from what she said to me, which changed my life and led to quantum love, is she said, you have to be really cognizant of the energy you're bringing when you go in to see him. And I was like, I am, even if I've had a bad day, I know that he is really empathetic. And so when I walk in there, I'm shaking it, I'm smiling. And then I remembered that we'd had a neuropsych evaluation because of all the issues. And the woman said to me, I think he may have a social learning issue. And I said, I don't see any symptoms of that. Why do you say that? And she's like, because I was, asking him questions about feelings. And I smiled at him and I said, how am I feeling? And he said, sad. And I didn't understand that at the time. But once I had this conversation with Therese Rowley, I was like, oh, holy shit. He was picking up on what this woman was feeling. And he just said the truth of it.
Even though she was smiling, she was sad.
She was feeling sad.
Right.
And so that really, I was like, oh, so even if I had a really crappy day and I'm feeling really stressed or really upset or really sad or really worried about him, garnering myself for a depressed kid as I walk in the room and feeling that anxiety, but not showing it. Hey, honey, how was your day? He's actually feeling it. Oh, okay. So when he came home that afternoon, I said, okay, I got to tell you something. I had done all the clearing before that she taught me how to do. And I was like, this is who I met with today. And this is what she said. And I was just expecting him to say something snarky. And he said, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I think what you're saying is true. And I said, okay, well, let me do this other thing she told me I should do, which is to give you a grounding hug. And so I hugged him and, he barely let me touch him back then. He was 16 or 15. And I brought love in through the top of my head and I shared it through my heart and I just silently, and he melted, completely melted in my arms. And to this day, he still asks me for grounding hugs. But that really amazed me. And then it was a done deal when a few weeks later he came to me out of the blue and said, I was in my locker today and I was having a really good day, but all of a sudden I felt really anxious and depressed. And I didn't know why, but I looked up and there was a girl a few lockers down. And I thought to myself, oh, she must be angry and depressed. And it wasn't me feeling angry and depressed. And that was the beginning of his climb out of the chaos and the beginning of my journey into quantum love. But that's the point, is that we're all mostly unconsciously impacting one another's moods and energy and the way they show up for us. I mean, it's really the secret behind the secret, because, you could write yourself a check for $10 million, but if you're not inhabiting in your body the energetic frequency of the person who has the $10 million, it's not going to happen.
It's not. I can completely relate to your son. I'm clairsentient as well. I struggled with the same things. And the good news is, just tell him I understand what he's going through. It's a superpower.
It is.
It is a superpower. Once he knows how to control his energy, he can really, really help people out that will not reach out, that are alone with their feelings. So it's an amazing superpower. And I'm so grateful that he learned at an early age, because some people, they never know. They'll go to the movie theater and find themselves crying for no reason in the middle of a happy movie.
Oh my God, I couldn't take him anywhere, anywhere crowded. Oh my gosh, it was such a nightmare.
Yeah, parties are a nightmare for a while for me. Like if I go to a party, I'm horrified because I'm gonna have to feel the whole room. So
and the happier people are, like we were members of this country club for a while where everybody's like, the white picket fence and that bullshit.
Right.
And I never understood why he would become like enraged and depressed, and it was because he was feeling like all the grossness underneath the white picket fence facade, in everyone's lives.
The true feeling.
Made so much sense.
It's always a true feeling. It's not what we see on the face of it, which is a superpower. It's an amazing superpower. So
he is definitely, he's now 26, so he's definitely stepped into that, and it's really changed his life.
So you described there's a difference between falling in love and quantum love, and how would you define the difference between those two?
Well, what's available to you when you start to really live from quantum love and practice this in your relationship is that you have so much more. Like one of the biggest issues that people struggle with in love is getting their needs met in a way that really feels fulfilling and feeling so like having that sense of empowerment and efficacy and control. Not that you want to control your partner, but like that it's not an uphill battle to get your needs met. And also that we long for this really deep connection. I mean, that's what we're wired for. And so what I have found is when you start practicing quantum love and you're really kind of setting intentions of how you want to feel in love and moving your body into the energetic frequency of the feeling that you want your partner to meet you at, then everything starts to change for the better in your relationship. I mean, it really is, like I often caution people, like, use this for good, not evil, because it really is. And I say this in a positive way, but it really is like a Jedi mind trick. And, my husband, who I just had my 20th anniversary with, my nickname for him is Senior Root Chakra, because he is so pragmatic and very in his head, right? And, we're very different in that way, which I love and isn't really an issue, but he is so smart and pragmatic that he's like, I can't win an argument with him. He can be really stubborn about his position on things. And since I have been practicing quantum love and living from that, I just have to like set the intention for everything from like, I want to go on this trip to I'm about to have a difficult conversation that I know, is maybe going to be a little bit prickly for the two of us, to just like how I want him to show up in the relationship. All I have to do is move myself into the energetic frequency of that which I want from him, and he just falls into line in a good way,
Yeah.
it's not like I'm controlling him and he's a robot, but he shows up the way that I am manifesting. And so it's been cool for me as a therapist, because in the past, a couples therapist, because in the past, you know, it really worked best. I could settle for just one of you, but really I needed both of you. And so much of the work, if one of you wouldn't come in, would be like trying to get the one of you who didn't want to come in, and then doing everything I could to a point with the one of you I had, but ultimately I needed the two of you. With quantum love, I don't need the two of you. Just one of you makes the changes and everything changes.
Now, one of the most popular topics for my channel, which is about reality creation, in particular with relationships, is finding that specific person. Oftentimes I get people that contact me, and there's this person at Starbucks. Every time I go and buy the Starbucks, I want this person so badly, and this is my entire life, and you're going to tell me I can do it, and if you tell me I can't, I'm going to go to someone else that tells me I can't. So I want your perspective. When somebody comes to me and says, Brian, I want this person, and that is the only person, even if there's somebody that's amazing, that's better for them, right? Yeah. I want this person. Does that work? Can it work? What is the process in attracting a specific, because we can create a reality, of course, and of course we can attract them, right? Of course we can attract anybody if you reach that level of mastery over your quantum field. But there's a lot more to it, and you've experienced this with clients on the front end and the back end. So tell me your experience with the specific person.
Well, when someone says something like that to me, like I don't, you know, it's the person who's always at Starbucks when I go in there to, you know, send emails at 10 a.m. or it's the barista or whatever, or it's the person that's in the elevator when I go to work. The truth is that 99% of the time you have zero idea about anything to do with that person. What has happened is that you have attributed a whole backstory and front story to who this person is, right? So that's where I start to challenge them and say, okay, before we do that, you know, let's get really, really clear about what you want to manifest, because what is it? What is your story about who this person is? What qualities they must have based on what you've seen so far. And most importantly, which is the key when it comes to manifesting, how does you feel when you think about waking up next to this person every day? Because now you've this is me talking to you, they've projected onto that person qualities and characteristics that are going to make them feel a certain way. Everything we want, from a new car to a house to a partner to a job, is because we want to feel a certain way. So if you're seeing that person in Starbucks and you want them, it's because you have a story that being with them is going to make you feel a certain way. What is it? Right? What is it? And then if that's what you really want, let's see if this person is the one to give it to you. Okay. So let's say you imagine that because most people aren't even aware of how they want to feel in love, which by the way, is the secret of the secret of the secret of the secret of calling love in, or anything in. You got to know why you're doing it, and why you're doing it is how you want to feel. So you got to get really clear on how you want to feel, what feeling you're looking for. And then you need to start cultivating that feeling in a million different ways that may have nothing to do with the reality you're trying to create, right? So if your story about that guy in Starbucks is that if I were with him, I would feel cherished because I see the way he is with his dog every day, and he's so sweet to her, and and I, you know, that's what I want to feel cherished, right? So what I would do is help you cultivate the feeling inside your body, in your imagination, and in all sorts of different ways that have nothing to do with love, of feeling cherished, of really cultivating that frequency in your body. And what starts to happen is one of two things. If you want to test that guy, you want to see if he's the one, right? As you start cultivating, there's, you know, usually I go for like 3 feelings. So let's say it's cherished, passionate, and safe. I'm just, you know,
Right.
so you would be cultivating those feelings. You would be learning what because you start when you cultivate those feelings in a really conscious way, which is what I teach in quantum love, you start to understand viscerally and somatically what that feeling feels like in your body. And you can move your body into that energetic frequency of that feeling in an instant once you practice it. So then I would have you go into Starbucks and cultivating around that person the energy of being cherished and being safe and being, you know, just holding that energetic frequency. And if he really is a match for what you really want, he's going to walk his ass over, sit, like he's not going to be able to resist you. If he's
Like the
not a
tuning
match,
forks, right?
yeah, if you're just going to, he's going to be magnetized.
Right.
That's really what calls love in. And if he doesn't, then you've made up a whole story about him, and that's not really who he is.
And so that's one of the commitments that you dedicate a chapter on in Quantum Love is how do I will get clear on what I want. And so you've explained that as an important part of the process. How can I get clear on what I want? What is the best way for me to truly get clear on what it is that I want? What would you recommend that I do?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that what we want is shifting and changing all the time throughout our lives, right? So that's not a stagnant thing. But it's really about, usually we get to what we really want, which, you know, hint, what you really want is how you want to feel, right? But we get to what we really want by thinking about, you know, it usually starts with the quality and characteristics. So let's continue in the dating front, right? Like, or even in a current relationship, you know, but in dating, I'm lonely. I want to call love in. Okay. So if you were to wake up next to you have the perfect mate, like designed for you, and you are and perfect match, and you're waking up to them next to them every single day, how do you feel? Right. And sometimes people don't even know that. Right. So then we have to start with, okay, what qualities and characteristics does this person have that you want to call in? Oh, they're driven. Okay. So what you're really looking for is, you know, if you're someone who's driven too, is a sense of companionship and freedom. Because if you're really driven, then you want someone else driven because they understand your drive, you know, and they inspire you. So you want to feel inspired, free. If you're someone who isn't really driven, but wants someone driven, you probably want to feel safe and cared for. Right. You know, so you have to go beneath the quality you're looking for to or sometimes you can even say, I mean, that's just what I've learned. I have this whole kind of chart I show people that demonstrates like, okay, if this is the quality you're looking for, this is the feeling you're really looking for. But sometimes it's just a matter of going into your imagination and saying, okay, I have that really compassionate person or driven person or kind person or loyal person or whatever that is that I'm calling in. What do I feel in my body? What feelings are real am I living in day out when I'm with that person? And then once you understand how you really want to feel, then the rest is easy.
So you talk beyond that about taking responsibility, and this brings up some other issues. I'm as somebody that's a counselor that's talked to a lot of people in different relationships. You have abusive relationships. You have you have a partner that's, you know, like a criminal, and crazy stuff comes up. And so sometimes when you're talking to somebody and saying you have to take responsibility for everything, that can be difficult. So explain a little bit more about why taking responsibility in this situation on a quantum love basis is important no matter what, and why it's a powerful technique.
Well, I think this is a tough one that definitely triggers people, whether it's in the relationship space or the life space, because the first thing people say is like, well, you know, what the heck? Like, are you saying that it's my fault that I got cancer? Are you saying it's my fault that I wanted to be abused as a child? You know, no, or now or whatever. No, of course, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that every millisecond of our existence, we are, most of the time, unless we're practicing quantum love, we are manifesting unconsciously. everything that has happened, you have co-created with the universe, spirit, holy oneness, whatever you want to, you're manifesting, you're already manifesting everything that's happening to you and will happen to you, right? What this is about is getting conscious. That's not to say that it's your fault or that you wanted it or that you asked for it. But that there are ways in which you were an energetic frequency match for it. And as someone who has had breast cancer, been cheated on, went through a horrible divorce, had a child with cancer, lost a child to death, to fentanyl poisoning, lost my mother to cancer, so many heartbreaks. I can tell you that from this perspective where I live now, I can see the way in which I was a frequency match, or the way in which my soul signed up for this because of the growth and expansion it was going to move me toward. And I think that's really the key to what I'm talking about when I say take responsibility. And also, I also mean taking responsibility for the energetic frequency you bring into the room, like I was talking about with my son.
Right. As somebody that deals with people in relationships issues, and this is an obvious answer, but I want to go into it because I realized it in my own life. It's more than it's patterns. Mm-hmm. I had a pattern for a long time. I would always attract somebody that would cheat on me. Mm-hmm. I would walk in on them cheating. I would always catch them cheating. I was always looking for it. I had to break that pattern. And so I noticed that too when I try to help people. It's not just the relationship they're in. If you go deeper, it's always an ongoing pattern.
Always.
And so talk to me a little bit more of that. First of all, a lot of people, we're like zombies to it. We don't even know that we've been in this pattern, right? And the pattern is sometimes the key, right?
The pattern is the key, and also understanding the unconscious wish and the way you've been accidentally a frequency match for these relationships that don't serve you, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're a frequency match to someone who cheated, right? So sometimes it's because your first partner cheated and it devastated you, and then you became attached to all the pain of that. Mm-hmm. And then, and I talk about this in Quantum Love, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if you are spending your time expecting to be cheated on, garnering to be cheated on, preparing to be cheated on, you are a frequency match for being cheated on, right? So there's that piece of it. But there's also the psychological piece, which is what therapists call repetition compulsion. And so, the classic example is like, okay, your repetition compulsion might be that you grew up in a family where there was cheating, where one or other of your parents cheated, and you witnessed and experienced, or maybe even was the emotional caretaker for the parent that got cheated on. And then there's that wound. So then you're attracted to people who cheat, because the repetition compulsion piece is that there's this, because a child, when these things happen to us in childhood, the child's cognition, their cognitive capacity is such that everything that happens to them is because of them. If dad leaves, it's not because he was an unmedicated bipolar or an addict or had nothing, things that had nothing to do with me. As a child, you think, if I were more of something or less of something, daddy would have stayed, right? Mm-hmm. So we internalize that. And then that becomes part of our love map and part of what we're attracted to, because so then we start becoming attracted to people who abandon, right? In the daddy left scenario. And so what's happening unconsciously is your inner child, who's often driving the bus, is saying, okay, I can even unconsciously smell on this person that they're not committed and they're not really going to stay, but I can convince them. I can be lovable enough that if they actually stay, then I can finally believe I'm worthy of love, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you do. So let's say you had a parent, maybe you're even conscious on a certain level, and you had a parent who is an addict, and you say, okay, I'm never gonna, let's say they were an alcoholic. I'm never gonna date someone who's can't control their alcohol or drinks more than a few glasses a week. Like, that's it. I'm never gonna date an alcoholic. But you're not dealing with your wounds of growing up with an alcoholic, your codependence. You're not really growing your soul or getting conscious, you are going to be, you may not date an alcoholic, right? That's now one of your requirements, is that they not drink. And so you meet someone and it feels like you've always known them, and they feel so familiar to you, and they don't drink, and they're so amazing. And you get into this long-term relationship with them, and the next thing you know, they're a freaking gambling addict or a sex addict or some other kind of addict. And so that's the way in which we kind of get into these patterns of repetition, both unconsciously trying to heal the wounds of our childhood, and also because, as you said, the trauma of having gone through that now has changed the lens. So now we're looking for it, seeking it, protecting against it, resisting against it. And that which you resist persists, right? So it's not going to change until you do.
And so that, kind of brings us to the chapter where you talk about, I will realize when I'm stuck and shift from brain to mind. That's a big chapter that helps break the pattern that is important. So talk about that a little bit more. You talk about the difference between brain and mind, and how do we realize when we're stuck? How do we shift from that stuckness to that next level?
Well, it starts, it's kind of a progression, right? So you're learning how to be attuned to your body and how you feel, and starting to recognize when you are in ego frequency. When you're in ego frequency, it's important to shift, right? Now, does that mean that you tap it away or positive think it away and it's all better? No. In fact, I think one of the problems with the personal empowerment or spiritual teaching world is that so often we're taught to bypass ourselves, right? Oh, I'll just tap it away and shift, right? Those things can be temporary band-aids, but they're not really getting to the core wounds. And it's not until we heal those core wounds that we can really shift our core frequency. So that's part of it. But in moment to moment, there are so many ways, and I get into all kinds of them in the book, but there's so many ways to shift yourself from being stuck. And one of the ways to know that you're stuck in a relationship, certainly, or really in any exchange, is to be convinced. Anytime you are convinced you're right, you are definitely stuck.
Right.
And that's a big red flag for yourself, to start going into some of these shift moves and starting to question and starting to explore how you're feeling inside your body, what you're feeling emotionally, what triggered it, what old wound might have just come up, so it is a conscious practice. So there are practical ways to shift in the moment, but then there's this deeper healing to do if you really want to create good love in your life.
So you go on to the, I believe the final chapter of the book is about quantum sex.
Yes.
And so there's, you talk about all of the issues of our desires and motivations of sex, relating it to the quantum love principles that you had talked about before. So can I use this quantum love that you've taught us to improve my sex life? How does sex change? How should I look at sex?
Yes.
How should I look at sex from this perspective?
Yes, quantum sex is a lot of fun. That's actually going to be, I just finished a book that's going to release, but quantum sex is my next book. It's so much fun, but it's based on the basic principle that sex is an energy exchange at the most fundamental level. And so that's important for a couple of reasons. One is that, especially for women, there is an energetic hangover to sex. So who you have sex with, whose energy you allow inside your body is important. But also, as you start to learn how to, because, if you think about even sexual stimulation, right? If you think about physical arousal, it's, for most of us, localized to the genitals. You have tingling, warmth, arousal, engorgement, erections, whatever, arousal there. And if you have an orgasm, it's usually localized to that area too. What I teach people to do with quantum sex is to work, because that's energy, that's vibrational energy that's there. So I teach you how to move that right? So you can pull it up your body and let it blow out your head. You can circle it around the two of you. You can exchange it back and forth. You can pull it up from the earth or down from above and share it with your partner. There's so many beautiful ways to play with the energy that creates such profound intensity. And that's what I find, as a sex therapist, along with a love and relationship therapist from, I guess, close to 30 years, maybe even a little bit more. The most common question I get from couples in long-term relationships are like, how do we spice it up?
Right.
And that's fine. Like, I'm a big spice. I love talking about spicing it up. And I could give you a year's worth of tips, tools, positions, toys, role plays. And in a year, or maybe a year and a half, because you do a few of them twice, but you'd eventually come back to me saying, okay, now help me spice, now help me. Because what we're really looking for, we think we're looking for novelty, but that's a very shallow kind of sexual experience. It's exciting, and it's all we know, most of us, but it's not, we think we want excitement, but what we really want is intensity. We want intense arousal, connection, experience with ourselves, with our partner. And that is found in my experience in quantum sex.
Now, these questions might get a little odd, but I talk about reality creation all the time on my channel, and the sexual event is this amazing energy producing event.
Yes. Sex magic.
Right. Sex magic is real. And the energy that you create, if you do it in tandem with mutual intention, maybe one of the most powerful techniques that you have available to change your reality that nobody's talking about.
That's a chapter in quantum sex.
Right.
Believe me, I am a huge proponent of sex magic, basically, because remember I talked about the quantum love map, right? Remember what I said was the highest frequency emotional state, feeling state, is that feeling of bliss. That is orgasm. And even arousal is very high in the quantum love map, but orgasm is the highest frequency energetic state our bodies can hold. And so when you set an intention, and ideally with your partner, then you got double trouble or double whammy, right? But even if it's just you through self-stimulation, or you even with a partner, if you are holding that intention through the sexual act, or even just leading into the sexual act, even if you can't remember at the point of orgasm, it doesn't matter. You are kind of supercharging that out into the quantum field.
So let's go through a scenario, a ritual of how this might work. So, people want to play with this. So before the sexual act, maybe cleanse the room from the energies that are there, right? And there seems like something happens when you cleanse the room before the act, even though it takes away some of the spontaneity. It's still, I'm just saying.
But you're also, it doesn't, spontaneity is just a myth too.
It's a myth too, right?
You're creating a sacred sexual space. There's something really sexy about that.
Right. And you can invoke entities if you want, if you believe in that, if that's something that you can do. Then you hold the intention beforehand. You don't necessarily, probably impossible in some cases to hold it the entire time. But once you've had the orgasm, before you decouple, you can share that moment instead of just, okay, wham, bam, thank you, man, and go. You can just share that moment together in that bliss and hold that intention together.
And even write it down beforehand on a piece of paper. And I sometimes teach people how to make their written intention, into a sigil. So it's like a symbol.
Right.
And then they focus on that symbol before they have sex, and maybe they put it above the bed, and then you can burn it after and really send it into the field.
Great, fantastic
fun stuff.
Absolutely amazing, and it's fun. Totally off topic, but I've studied the law of one, and it's this channeling where these entities from billions of years ago in Venus, that they claim that their whole planet transformed and moved to another level sexually. And it's all very kind of mysterious. And so I've continued, and I've even talked to people about it. It's far beyond my belief that culturally that we could do that, but there is something spiritual in sex. People need to acknowledge that we've been trained all of our lives to think of sex as as evil, as mysterious. We don't talk about it.
No.
Nobody's gonna, it's
Or
gonna be
something
rated
really
R, right?
kinky, or a means to an end, or a
Right.
tool, or a way to seduce, or a way to keep someone, or a way to get someone's attention. And sex has really been bastardized.
Mhm.
It is the most sacred act there is. And I don't mean sacred as in the Bible's sacred at all. I don't mean that. I mean one of the most potent, power-filled, and powerful energies we are capable of working with. And I think we've been, almost intentionally led away from that since the dawn of
Yeah,
Christianity, in order to dull this amazing birthright of profound manifesting power we have.
absolutely. So for the people that are listening that are single,
Yeah.
and I know that the thoughts are coming to my head, so that tells me I need to ask. So for those people that want to experience this same magic, but they don't have a partner, they can still experience this magic
Absolutely.
through masturbation and
Yes.
other, and they don't, and there's also in the community, there's this idea that masturbation is bad. It takes away your energy.
No,
I
no,
don't
no,
agree
no.
with that at all,
No, I
right?
don't agree with that at all. And there are some tantric beliefs, and it's okay. You can retain, you can have orgasms without ejaculation if you want to learn to do that. That's really what they're talking about when they talk about, and you're losing energy or life force. That's an ancient tantric principle about when men ejaculate, that they're giving away their life force. I think that's arguable, but you can subscribe to that and then just not go all the way to orgasm, or learn to have an orgasm without ejaculation, which you can do. And actually, that's what makes men capable of multiple orgasms. But you actually can absolutely do this by yourself as a sacred manifesting meditation and an act of profound self-love. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of people masturbating, because it's not only all of those benefits, but it's really good for your body. Sexual arousal and orgasm is good for your immune system, your blood flow, your heart, your mood. You're just keeping the plumbing going down there and cleared out. So when you do have a partner, you're able to respond, staying attuned to your body and how it's changing or how it's working. There's so many benefits to self-stimulation.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking about these wonderful topics. You have been amazing, and I recommend everybody get your book, Quantum Love, check out your podcast, The Language of Love, and your other books. You have a new ebook coming out, I believe October 17th, you said?
Yeah, you can pre-order it now.
And it's You're Not Crazy, You Are Just Ascending. And I know
Yes.
that the people in my group are going to love that, because we're all ascending, and the world is changing.
So
And
fast.
so it's amazing that Quantum Love wasn't written 50 years ago. This is, it's just amazing, because this seems like timeless information that everybody
Yeah.
needs to know. And it's important. If you're in a relationship, you need to read Quantum Love, because you will start to understand some of the weird stuff you've been through in your past relationship and the current one. It's eye-opening, because a lot of people in this community talk about quantum physics and
Yeah.
talk about reality shifting, but then they separate relationships and love from it as if it's another thing. It's not. It's
It's not.
fundamentally connected to the whole
Yeah.
thing. Reality creation is sex. It is. So
Yes.
thank you for your book and the knowledge, and so much. I just enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much, Laura, and welcome
It
to
was
the
really
Reality
fun.
Revolution.
Thank you. It was fun being with you.